What could be more idyllic than having a cup of tea in a gloomy afternoon and spilling some tea about the Australian education system? Education is the third largest export of Australia. International students bring in $32 billion per year to the Australian economy. Behind all the polished marketing videos featuring international students smiling joyously in the sun, embracing the multicultural experience and envisioning their bright future ahead, there's another reality. When economic profits trump academia's esteem, universities become corporations and international students become cash cows. As a former international student myself, do I feel like a cash cow? Yes, of course. This is not anything new. A lot of people have talked about it. Many articles have raised these concerns for years, but it's just how it is. International students being treated as cash cows can be reflected in three following phenomena. Number one, Australian universities rely on international student fees to be financially viable. According to The Guardian, universities collected a total of $2.3 billion in profit in 2019. Quote, without the international student fees, however, the university, would have collectively posted a loss of $7.7 billion. International students pay significantly higher fees than domestic students. In this graph, comparing between domestic full fees and international fees, the internationals pay 20% higher than the locals for a degree in commerce. However, domestic students rarely pay full fees. They are subsidized by the government and hence most of the time they pay half of what overseas students do. In a report by Grattan Institute, it is stated that, quote, while Australians could afford higher fees than international students, there are other reasons why they are charged less. Australian university objectives require universities to serve community and industry interests. International students, by contrast, are part of a commercial education industry. Their fees reflect global markets more than social or political considerations. Personally, I felt disheartened when I learned about this side of Australian universities after I came here. But I don't want to be a hypocrite because I also thought if I were on Australian school, I would do the same. Let's milk all these poor international students. Besides paying tuition fees, international students also contribute to the Australian economy by spending their money, paying their rent, or using public transport. So you can see this is a very ludicrous business. The second phenomenon is that the Australian schools what do I want to say? The Australian schools try to increase their international student intake by lowering their entry requirements, especially English requirements. Most international students here in Australia come from non-English speaking countries. Most prestigious Australian schools would require at least IELTS 6.5 with no skill lower than 6. For those of you native speakers who are watching this video and are confused about what I'm talking about, IELTS is a universal English test. The highest score is 9, so if you're native, you can easily score an 8 or a 9. For somebody who have IELTS 6.5, I think they're pretty well equipped for their tertiary courses. This is how somebody with a band 6 in speaking sounds like.
So for currently I'm living in Australia, and the city is Canberra, and I would say even though it's capital city, it's more countryside than Seoul, I guess, because when I come out of my room, I can see the kangaroos running around.
It's not too bad, right? However, there's a loophole. If you do not have the sufficient English level, you can still come to Australia and then finish a 10 to 20 week English program from either your university, at the same university you apply for your undergrad course, or other recognized English institutions. After finishing the program, you can go straight to uni without having to sit for another IELTS test. The thing is, whether these English courses are as good as a parameter as IELTS is questionable. But anybody who have the experience in an Australian university would admit that there are students in the universities cannot even speak English, yet still manage to finish their undergrad or even postgrad degree. How did they get in? How did they pass? Nobody knows. Nobody really knows. Here is a story from an ABC article. Recently at an elite Australian university, it's an elite Australian university, it's not any shitty university, okay? A senior humanities lecturer opened the office door to a young international student who was accompanied by another woman and seemed nervous. Quote, "She couldn't speak any English and she didn't understand anything I said," unquote. The woman accompanying the student, whom the lecturer assumed was a friend, was in fact a translator hired for the meeting. The student had gone through the first year of her degree without the ability to speak English. Quote, "which floored me," unquote, said the lecturer. Now, because universities lower their entry barriers, there's a huge disparity in terms of language proficiency among students. So when it comes to group work, we start to see the frustration. I was lucky enough not to have many horror stories when it comes to group assignments. One experience though, I had assignment with this guy who literally had to translate what he wanted to say in Google Translate. I also want to clarify that only a proportion of international students struggle with English. Most of my international friends are incredibly fluent, so I don't want to paint a wrong picture about international students. We are a very diverse group of people. But of course, if you go to a shittier school, you would encounter more international students who can't even speak basic English. So choose your school wisely if you ever want to come here and study. Number 3, academic standards are lowered for students to pass more easily. I don't have any empirical evidence for this claim, so it's entirely based on my observation, my intuition, my speculation, and my experience, okay? So what I've observed is that it's very easy to pass. It may be a bit challenging to get high marks, but to pass is super easy. I don't even know how not to pass. Like, you must be doing nothing, absolutely nothing for you not to pass. Despite many concerns on English skills of a number of international students, the completion rates remain high. So we can argue that this is a sign that academic standards have been lowered for students with insufficient academic skills to pass. There was one incident that happened to me that made me feel like Australian schools can be a bit shady. It was my first semester and I just got the result for my assignment and I was disappointed because I only got a credit. There was no other explanation or no other feedback. So I emailed the lecturer and asked what more I could have done. I asked him if I could see him in his office because in his announcement email, he said that any students who have questions regarding their assignments result can come and see him. Anyway, shortly afterward, I received a reply from him saying that my mark has been adjusted to a distinction. Period. No explanation, nothing. I was very perplexed. Number 1, it implied that I shouldn't come and see him. Number 2, had he screwed up before? No, he fixed it. Or did he fix it because he wanted to be done with me? So it was a very weird experience. So what are the consequences? First of all, the university reputation suffer, but I don't care about that. Second of all, because there's a huge gap between the ability of students who already struggle with the English and the academic requirement of their course, many international students experience depression.
For some students, the pressure to succeed has become too much. In January this year, a Victorian Coroner's Court investigation found 27 international students had died by suicide in 6 years in that state alone.
To cover the living expenses in Australia, which is quite expensive, many international students work part-time. Many of them admit that they exceed the maximum working hour per week, which is 20 hours. So they can only receive cash on hand, and that's where they can be easily exploited. Many international students also find that they couldn't blend in with the locals, so far from the expectation to enjoy an Australian lifestyle, they opt to hang out exclusively with their group of friends who come from the same countries or similar cultures.
No one is the domestic student in our classes.
So they're all international?
I think most of them are from India, most of students.
Lots of people from India?
Yeah.
Are you disappointed?
Yeah, little bit.
Little bit. Because there is no local student domestic. So we can't communication with them and can get any experience. Local culture.
It's also very easy to feel isolated when you have to deal with all this stuff at the same time. So, should Australian universities be blamed entirely? I don't think so. Even though universities are responsible for half the problem, the other half should be the responsibilities of individual students. What often frustrates me is that many international students who lack English skills do not try to improve their English. They often hang out exclusively with their group of friends and they speak their mother tongue all the time. They don't read English news or they don't watch anything in English. A study done by IELTS in Australia showed that while some students show improvement of their English in the course of their first semester, others do not, and some even regress. If you couldn't improve your own skills, who else can, right? Another thing is that many international students do not contribute in class. The Aussies are very outspoken, so you can really tell which class has more internationals and which class has more locals by the atmosphere. If it's super quiet and nobody wants to answer the questions, then the majority of students are internationals. At times, I felt really bad for the lecturers. If I were to teach in those classes, I would just try to finish my job and then be done with it. I wouldn't care too much. I'm not sure if culturally international students tend to be more introverted compared to the Aussies. If you're an introvert and you feel that you're not comfortable speaking up in class, it's fine. But if you could push yourself a little bit, you should. I'm a very introverted person, but the people who have talked to me would not believe that I'm an introvert because I'm not shy, and over the years I've learned how to push myself to be more extroverted when needed. In a way, it's how I respect the other person. I don't want to be a stone in a conversation and let the other person carry all the weight. It's also a way for me to expand my personality. There are also many students come here just to stay here to get a PR. They do not genuinely want a good education. I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. I just think that when there's a demand of disingenuous students, there will be a supply of disingenuous education. What sucks is when universities can't distinguish between the genuine and the disingenuous. So they sometimes treat international students equally disingenuously. So what do you think about the fact that these days many universities are run like corporations? Please comment in the comments down below. And I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.